All right. In this episode of the Maximizing E-commerce podcast, we're going to be talking about what may or may not be an official announcement, but basically, I think everyone kind of knew this was coming, and this was changes to Amazon's policies or how they look at things like rebates, two-step URLs, and all that. So, if you're curious about that, how that might affect you or not affect you, is it a big deal, not a big deal? I'm going to give you my take on all of that here in this episode of the podcast. So let's go ahead and get into it. So, um, yesterday, as I recorded this, I was speaking at the Amazon powwow in Miami, and we were hanging out they had a speaker's room where folks who were, speaking on stage could go and just kind of relax for a little bit. And one of the other speakers said basically, um, oh, wait, there's this new policy change. And it's interesting because the policy change, usually this comes through the news. Like you get either an email about it or it comes through, like, if you can imagine on Seller Central, there's that news icon. It usually shows you like the latest 3 news articles. So it's basically, a company memorandum. This is interesting because it came from a um, a forums moderator on the uh, Amazon forum. So this is Amazon's official forum. So if you're in Seller Central, there's a forum there. It's definitely, the person is a moderator, and people have been talking a lot about this. When one of the other speakers was looking on their laptop and saw this, I was reading it. Some people were kind of starting to freak out a little bit. In fact, one of the other speakers even said that there was probably the need to change some slides in the presentation. So things change. It's a constantly evolving world. And so I'm going to read the policy. I don't even know if this is an official policy. So take this all with a grain of salt, because in a month from now, Amazon might have an official policy or news that comes out with this, but I think we all kind of know what's happening here. And so if you're not familiar with this, let me at least read the policy, and I'll link to this clarification on the policy, is the way they phrased it. I'll link to that in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, this will be in the YouTube description, as well as if you're listening to this and you'd rather see what I'm talking about, I'll link to the YouTube video. I don't always link to the YouTube video in the show notes, but I will this time. So, all right. So let's go ahead and pull this up. So just to share my screen, in fact, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So as it says, and this is coming, the title of the post is Clarification of Amazon's Policy on Rebates, Coupons, and Other Marketing Incentives. And it's under US announcements is the area of the forum, and C mod. And if you can't see SEE, what I'm talking about, this is CSEA mod. So that might be short for Seattle moderator. I'm assuming. I don't know, but apparently this person's been there for a while. So it says the Amazon Seller Code of Conduct, and there's a link to the Seller Code of Conduct, which we'll get into here in a moment, requires acting fairly and prohibits manipulating sales rank. We have recently received several seller inquiries regarding Amazon's policy on incentives that drive customer discovery and conversion, particularly through rebates, coupons, and other marketing incentives, and are offered outside Amazon as a way of driving sales to our store. We welcome and encourage coupons, discounts, deals, and other tools to lower prices for customers and drive incremental sales, but only when those incentives are part of the product offer made in our store. Amazon offers numerous programs to help you drive discovery of new products and increase sales through lower prices. And we welcome sellers advertising the same pricing and discounts off Amazon as they offer in our store. However, we consider a violation of the Amazon Seller Code of Conduct if off Amazon rebates, discounts, and other schemes are designed to drive customers to products that are listed and sold without those incentives on Amazon. These practices are potentially abusive to customers and other sellers, as they may inflate search ranking, incentivize product reviews, and generate artificial traffic and conversion behaviors. Specifically, it is a violation of the Amazon seller code of conduct to manipulate search rank to artificially boost your product's search ranking, including two-step URLs, and they put that in quotes, super URLs, also in quotes, funnels in quotes, treasure hunts, all of this is in quotes, search, find, buy, and any other form of false or misleading behavior. A service by any name that's intended to artificially boost search ranking or portray a discounted sales as full price is a violation. We would like to remind sellers that you are responsible for the actions taken by your account, even those handled by third-party service providers. Sellers may not have understood this policy previously should these let me reread that. Sellers who may not have understood this policy previously should end these practices immediately, as they are in violation of the Amazon seller code of conduct. In addition, we continue to audit developers in other seller central partner network. We continue to audit developers in our seller central partner network to ensure they're not offering abusive services and are removing any applications that violate these terms. Please see the full seller code of conduct within our selling on Amazon policies. If you have any additional questions, feel free to post them here. So, I'm looking now at the seller policies and seller code of conduct. So this is now an official policy. So what that person, actually, before we get into um, the official selling policies and seller code of conduct, this this post, it's four paragraphs long plus a sentence at the end, referring you to the seller code of conduct. This, having been in the corporate world, having been in the Fortune 500 world, this reads like something that's official. This reads like something that um, multiple levels of people in the organization probably read before this went out. I don't know that for a fact. It could be just, some moderators like, you know what, I'm going to clarify things, and it's just their opinion. As of right now, people in the seller community are pretty much all taking this as gospel. I would take this very seriously. If this turns out to not be um, official stance of the company, I'll do a rebuttal I don't know. Retraction is probably not the right word. I'll do a follow up. The right phrase there. But this is definitely something that is uh, phrased as if it is the company, because they keep using, whoever wrote this uses the word we. And one thing that's interesting that a lot of people have notated is that they're very specific in what is included in this clarification. Whereas Amazon's policies oftentimes are very gray, and sellers for years have been asking, can we get clarification on what these things mean? So the good news is, for everyone, regardless of where you are in the spectrum, and I'll get to my opinion on that here in a minute, for myself, this is something that would at least give us, okay, at least Amazon saying this is okay, this is not okay. So let's read the seller uh, policies and code of conduct. So let me share that back on the screen here. So um, this, so actually, just real quick. So the November 2nd is the date of the uh, not announcement, but the clarification of Amazon's policy on rebates, coupons, and other marketing incentives. And so this general policy is just the policy. Like, it doesn't really have a date on it. It's one of those things that, like, they just update it as time goes on. But, couple things that stick out to me, and this is something that Amazon has always been hammering about, um, is anything that's in the acting fairly section. Um, Well, let's go back up to the top. So the way this is written, for those of you who are listening, there's the seller code of conduct. This policy requires that sellers act fairly and honestly on Amazon to ensure a safe buying and selling experience. All sellers must, and there's a bunch of bullet points. And this is the very top of the policy. So it's kind of like basically an outline of what is included here. But the second, or actually, let's talk about the first two. Provide accurate information to Amazon and our customers at all times. Act fairly and not misuse Amazon's features or services. Um, Third one is not attempt to damage or abuse another seller, their listings or ratings. Not attempt to influence customers' ratings, feedback, and reviews. Um, Not send unsolicited inappropriate communication. Some of this other stuff is about communication, but the other one is not attempt to circumvent the Amazon sales process. That is a big thing. So if you kind of read between the lines between not attempt to circumvent the sales process, act fairly and not misuse Amazon's features or services, I think that's kind of where they're coming to. So in the acting fairly section, one of the big things, which regardless of how we want to interpret it, we're playing on their platform. So their platform, they're saying in their policy, manipulating, or sorry, it says you must act fairly and lawfully, and may not misuse any service provided by Amazon. Examples of unfair activities include manipulating sales rank, such as accepting fake orders or orders that you have paid for, or making claims about sales rank and product titles or descriptions. This the general thing they were talking about wasn't really talking about um, making claims about sales rank and product titles, but it was definitely talking about um, manipulating of sales rank. And so when you think about that, let's just take a step back, even outside of Amazon. Amazon is a search platform. What do all search platforms want? Whether it's Amazon, Google, Bing, YouTube, they want for whoever that user is to type in a phrase or a word and get what they're looking for, because it's an algorithm that's deciding, if it's on Google, if you type in, something about um, coffee, that you don't get articles back about Bluetooth headsets. I'm just looking at things on my desk to come up with that. So they want to make sure everything is relevant. Now, Amazon's the same thing. They want the customer to ultimately get the right product that they're looking for. And so they have a bunch of mechanisms. So what for years people in the search engine optimization, Amazon sellers, marketers, depending on creators on YouTube, what people have always looked for is what is that secret juice you can use to kind of give yourself an edge, is the way I think a lot of people have looked at it over the years. um, and so these platforms, sometimes are very transparent about, okay, here's what we're looking for. Some are a little more nebulous. Um, but at the end of the day, they're trying to get the right thing to the right person. So in Amazon, it's right product that the person's looking for. And so ultimately, they want control of the experience. And so this is just my opinion. Um, so what I think what they're when you really read the tea leaves, so to speak, and read between the lines, what they're trying to figure out is, okay, if the person is on Amazon searching for a phrase, that they get what Amazon's systems have created to be the right product. So Amazon, has spent millions, if not billions of dollars, creating this infrastructure. And I'm just talking about algorithm. I don't know how much money they've invested in their algorithm, but I would imagine, between, uh, you know, analysts, developers, programmers, um, you know, accounting people, um, data scientists, all these different people over the years to come up with what is the best product for it. So they've created their systems. So sometimes if sellers have things like rebates that are happening off Amazon, and when you think about it, there was a big thing that came out a couple weeks ago where there were rebate companies that seem to have been on Amazon service provider directory that were taken off. And so, because what a rebate's doing, they are um, in essence saying, okay, my price is $20, but I'm going to give a 50%, or, we've all known people that have done 100% rebates. So they're basically signaling to Amazon's algorithm that there is uh, a purchase that happened, but then they're giving the money back on the back end, and Amazon's algorithm doesn't know this. And one of the things, and now I'm going to start getting into my opinion a little bit more. And I've talked to people about these type of scenarios, and the phrase people have used a lot is, well, they'll never know. Like, Amazon will never know. I've never liked that. Now, to get into kind of my opinion here, I tend to go with things very white hat, in the sense of following by the rules. And maybe it's just because I worked in the Fortune 500 world for years before going into entrepreneurship, and it gets kind of beaten into your head about, there's this like um, friendly threats made to you, like, constantly, like, with a smile of like, if you follow our policies, you'll have a great career here, and if you don't, you'll be terminated. And it just kind of gets ingrained in your head of like, okay, there's certain rules you have to follow. And all companies and large organizations have these kind of systems where, like, they evolve. And there's this sense of like a good analogy. My father-in-law is retired as a FBI agent, and one of the things he talked about, and they're law enforcement, so they're following the law. um, but it's an organization of people, and sometimes people do things in organizations that aren't what they would have wanted them to do, but maybe it was not against the rules. And so there were, one of the way he's described it is like, sometimes someone would do something that would be so egregious, like, within the organization. And I don't know, so if anyone's listening from the FBI, I'm not, he didn't reveal anything that would be like secretive. um but like, it would be like, somebody does something, let's say at a somebody does something or says something at a uh, company function, or in the case of the FBI, I guess it wouldn't be a company, like a official thing, and it's not against the rules, whatever they did, but someone high up would look at that like, wait, you can't do that. And it just kind of, it doesn't pass the sniff test, I guess, is the way maybe I should phrase this. And it's hard to describe that, but in the corporate world, there is this sniff test of, whether it be the FBI, whether it be Amazon, whether it be Disney, whether it be whatever company, that like, sometimes, like, maybe it's not outside of the rules, but it doesn't sit well with people high up. And so the thing you have to kind of look at sometimes is, I've always used this uh, barometer to figure out, what am I doing and is this acceptable? And I've always liked to think of it as like, okay, maybe you've heard of this New York Times test. And so this is a phrase that I've heard people use for a long time, of the New York Times test, meaning, whatever you're doing, are you comfortable having that on the New York Times? Or another way I've phrased it to people is, um, whatever you're doing, put the words "Your Honor" in front of it. So if you were ever in court and you're describing something and you're like, well, da da da, just say "Your Honor," da 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 da. So, like, as if you're talking to a judge. And if you still feel comfortable with it, then you're probably okay. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, maybe that's something you need to reevaluate. Now, taking the New York Times and the Your Honor test, one of the things I've looked at it is like, let's say I have my procedures of what I'm doing, and they're in big, bold, very easy to read font on a piece of paper, and I'm on an elevator and I get stuck. And who's on that elevator with me but Jeff Bezos? Or maybe now it's Andy Jassy, who's now the CEO of Amazon. And so, I am I comfortable with what I put on this, talking about it to him? Or am I going to try to hide it? Or if he starts asking about it, am I going to, try to dance around it? Or am I going to say, yeah, I'm really excited about, such and such? If there's any hesitation in sharing this with someone at Amazon officially, the light will always come out. They have the data. So whenever people say, oh, they'll never know, they can figure things out. There's correlations they can make between data. They know who these buyers are. Sometimes the buyer that does one rebate will buy another rebate, especially when these things are going in groups. Or, Facebook has an algorithm that's probably figuring out, oh, the type of people who buy this type of offer or these people. And so Amazon starts to figure out, wait, these are all the same type of people, which, maybe it was Facebook's algorithm figured out if you're doing Facebook advertising to get people to some of these tactics. So if it's not within what Amazon wants, because again, we're at a dinner party at their house is the way we have to ultimately look at this. And one thing to say is, you could be doing something that's completely within the rules and you have to change it. So, when I first got started on Amazon back in early 2016 as a private label seller, I'd been doing retail arbitrage before that. When I first started with my own brand, the tactic that everybody talked about back then was reaching out to reviewers who were top 10,000 reviewers. And, there were directories of, how you could find these people. And, Amazon put this data out there in the public sphere. Like, so if you leave a review, you can, if you want, have your contact information on there. I haven't checked it in a long time, actually. So maybe nobody's contact information is there anymore. But it used to be, you could get there. And so one of the things people would like to do is have like a top 10,000 reviewer, or sometimes a top 100 reviewer or whatever, review their product. And there was a cottage industry of people on the flip side of that, not just sellers, but the reviewers who it was almost like their job reviewing these products. And I think they really enjoyed sellers begging them to leave a review. And what oftentimes would happen is, we would send them a free product. And as long as it said something along the lines of, this review was made because we received a product, or they probably phrased it. There was some phrasing they had to basically disclose the fact that they had gotten a free or discounted product in exchange for a review. And people nowadays might be thinking well, that's totally egregious. You could never do that. Well, because Amazon later on, about, let's say this might have been, I want to say it was September of 2016, that Amazon came out with a very definitive, this wasn't in a forum, this was in the news section of thou shalt not. And I think some of it was they'd gotten, I want to say, if I remember correctly, they got beat up in the, maybe it was TechCrunch or one of those type of articles was written about them. I wouldn't call it a hit piece, but it was just basically saying somebody did an analysis of reviews that did or did not say some of that phrasing of, which was totally legit back then. At least it was acceptable practice, even in Amazon's eyes, to have the phrasing there. And so one of the things ultimately I think we have to look at is, Amazon could change, or let me go back and finish that thought, that the whole phrasing, if the phrasing of, received for whatever, so somebody must have looked for keywords within, it scraped thousands of reviews off of Amazon, and they found there was a correlation between received, for an honest review, and people would say things like, honest review, da 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 da. And, as long as you didn't say to the person, going back a little bit more for context for folks who weren't around during those days, as long as you didn't say to the top 10,000 reviewer, hey, leave me a 5-star review, as long as you just said, hey, if you leave me a review, or if you would be willing to leave an honest rating or leave an honest review, I will give you a product. And that was okay back then, as long as you didn't say, and maybe I'm misphrasing this, so this has been a few years, but bottom line, as long as you weren't asking for a 5-star review, it was kind of okay. So, but there was still kind of this unspoken dance between sellers and top 10,000 reviewers, because the reviewers ultimately want product, and they kind of know all their reviews are kind of right out there in the public. So if they're leaving 1 stars on everything, then who's going to want to ask them to review their product? So this article on TechCrunch or whatever did an analysis of, like I was saying, whether or not there was this disclosure in the review, or is just a regular, Joe Schmo, whomever, leaving the review as a, just a standard Amazon customer, there was a markable difference. Like it might have been like 4.7 versus 4.3 on average or something like that. Like they noticed there was, you could see a difference. And so Amazon didn't like that, because Amazon, at the end of the day, they have to protect their platform. And we as sellers ultimately want them to protect their platform. Because if customers don't trust the platform, we don't get to make the sales there. And so yes, it's going to be frustrating if uh, some of these tactics change. And so, like in the case of the top 10,000 reviewer, that tactic changed. Or, using an analogy off of Amazon, when I first started kind of more as a lurker. So if you're listening to this podcast, I know a lot of people listening are um, active sellers, but if you're listening to this and you're kind of like thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, I was in that game of thinking about getting into entrepreneurship and dabbling in little projects here or there um, for a couple years. And so in my dabbling and listening phase, it was about early 2012, maybe. The big thing for people that were in Google article writing and SEO was Penguin and Panda, these updates that they called Penguin, and another one was Panda. And it basically, some people's entire businesses were wiped out. And that was a big thing. And people, if you listen to some, not necessarily Amazon related, but just digital marketing podcasts, you'll hear people talk about this still. It wiped out a lot of people and these businesses that people had that were all based on basically organic search traffic on Google. But Google eventually said, we don't like whatever it was that people were doing. And so they just said, okay, we're changing our algorithm. And so everyone who had built a business entirely on an algorithm was wiped away. There are people who, assuming this clarification of Amazon's policy on rebates, coupons, and other marketing incentives, that have based, I mean, there's services out there who, you know, their entire thing is to create the two-step URLs or to set up the treasure hunts or the search find buys or whatever. I mean, some of those are more gray hat than others, but I guess they didn't pass the sniff test. So I've always stayed away from them, to be honest, because anything going back to like what I was saying, if a business is based on a tactic, that's a huge bottleneck. And so if a tactic is something like two-step URL, super URLs, and somebody might find a way around this in the future, but if it ever, taking a step back even further, if it's based on they'll never know, that's usually a bad sign. So that's my 2 cents of, at the end of the day, I was not involved in these. So my personal business isn't affected by this. A lot of the people I know that listen to my content and are, interested in what I have to say have probably come to realize I'm fairly risk averse with tactical things like this. There are still plenty of things at your disposal that you can use. I don't think lightning deals are really a good thing anymore, but you could use lightning deals. I think they still do them. I did one earlier this year, and I don't remember if they ended up charging me or not, because I don't think I had literally had one single sale off a lightning deal. And but you still have things like coupons. You still have things like the Vine program to get early reviews. You still have you know other programs Amazon has. You still have PPC. This is going to probably drive up PPC costs a little bit. And so just keep tabs of what all's happening, and just realize that oftentimes what this will also do is get rid of some sellers who can't adapt. So like going back to myself, doing something that was totally okay back in 2016, but then one day with the stroke of a pen, so to speak, became no longer acceptable. I had to change up my tactics. So if you're, these were all kind of gray before, and you can kind of read between the lines of where Amazon's policies have been going and some of the other changes they've made to service providers and who's on their network and directory. You kind of see where they're going with this. And so they want to keep everything within their control on their platform, so that the people who search for Bluetooth speaker are getting the Bluetooth speaker that Amazon's algorithm, the way it's designed, is showing, and not ones that people for lack of a better phrase, manipulated to get into the search rankings. So I hope that makes sense. And I know this could be disappointing for a lot of people. I do feel for people if this was something that is disappointed, or maybe in a month from now we realize this was just some rogue person, and there's an official clarification. It's like, oh no, you can do all this. That I highly doubt, but I will be more than happy to do an update video as more comes out. I don't know if it'll be on the podcast or just on my channel in general, but this is definitely. Usually, I don't do these type of videos as podcasts, but I just thought it was very relevant. And just because literally I found out about it from one of the speakers, in our speaker lounge at the Amazon powwow yesterday, as I record this. Um, Found this and read it, and I've seen just today like people posting screenshots of it and whatnot. And there's a lot of debate back and forth. Some people are kind of in the camp of like, well, good, this creates more of an equal playing field for people that aren't giving away 20 units a day to stay on page one for some hero product. I get it. I'm kind of in that boat myself of I always feel for people. But I've always stayed away from these things. And and if you've listened to my podcast, I'm okay with having people having discussions about things that maybe are a little bit gray, as long as we can have a discussion about why this is, or maybe why you would or wouldn't want to do this. Um, and anytime anyone's ever talked about anything that's rebate related on my podcast, I've always challenged them. I always do it in a respectful way, but I've always kind of challenged it, like, okay, tell me why you think that's within terms of service. Because to me, that always felt like, or the sniff test was that seemed like review manipulation or sales rank manipulation or something like that. And so, because it's not within the channel of what Amazon's creating, and they even started out their things basically saying that we create all types of ways for you to drive customer discovery and conversion. And so this was not a rogue thing. This was a very well crafted, well written, probably proofread by many people and green lighted by many people. I highly doubt this was just one person who's like, yeah, I want to. And this happens sometimes in corporations too, where just one random person will put something out there that's not necessarily what their pay grade allowed them to do. Um, and so this looks like something that wasn't just someone whose job is moderating forums put out there. Like, this was directed. It was either written by that person at the uh, requirement or request or permission of higher level people within the company, knowing how big companies work. Something that's as well written as this came from multiple levels. This is my theory, so I would definitely take it very seriously. And the thing to note too is they said ultimately you are responsible as the seller for actions taken on your account. So always be very wary of anyone that says, oh yeah, this is within terms of service, or like I mentioned before, anyone that says they'll never know. Oh, they'll know. They'll know. Um, so that's just my 2 cents. So hopefully this video, or this was helpful to you. If you are uh if you're listening to the audio podcast, head over to Instagram at Maximizing Ecommerce. Hit me a DM. Let me know your thoughts. I want to hear people's thoughts on this. Or if you're watching the video, please leave a description. Please leave a comment down below. Would love to have a dialogue on this, because I know this could be devastating for a lot of people. And for a lot of people, this might be, okay, this just equals the playing field. Or they just at least feel like we've gotten some level of clarification as sellers that we've been looking for. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing. And I wish you the best in your e-commerce journey. Take care.